Month. My name is Paris, where I'll be giving you all the news from across the seas or across the street and let you know how it's impacting you and yours. So let's get right into it. First and foremost, it is Black History Month. We've been celebrating it for 100 years, so shout out to us. But there's a lot more things happening nationwide, and I'll start off with the Trump RX website. Officially, they launched it yesterday, and it's kind of like a direct to consumer situation where you go on this website and you can get these prescription drugs straight from the website. It's said to be at a cheaper price than what you would pay out of pocket, which I find very interesting. Like I said, it launched yesterday. So right now, it'll consist of 40 drugs at a lower cost that patients would normally pay an expensive amount out of pocket, but it's said to have lowered that cost. Now, a lot of people are thinking, how are people just going to get this stuff off of the website? I'm trying to figure that out too. But like I said, it launched yesterday. So there are some things that we'll start learning as the website unravels and you start to learn a little bit more. When you get on the website, though, I got on it just before the show, and it shows about 4 prescriptions. I know Ozempic is on there as well. And they're calling it the most impactful prescription price reset in the history of our country. That's a big deal right now because I know a while back they released the prices and how much it would be a change from what people are already paying when it comes to regular prescription prices, and especially more popular things like Ozempic that people have been doing recently. So if you are into Ozempic or you know some people that are doing that, you might want to take a look and see how that differentiates between what you're paying from any regular place you're getting that drug from to what's different on this Trump RX. Like I said, there are a lot of questions that people may have, but if you scroll to the bottom of the website, it's actually a whole thing of FAQs where you might get some answers to your questions. Next, a lot of talk about this conversation between the United States and Iran. Here are some important things that you should probably keep in mind. This is a conversation about the nuclear program. It's been a talk for a while, but the U.S. has spent a month apparently moving Navy ships and warplanes into the region. And if they can't reach a deal today, people have reason to believe that President Trump could launch an attack on them, according to the GPD. And if both sides can reach a deal, then they'll go back home and regroup and they figure out what to do next. Now, this is a very touchy topic, a very interesting situation because to say if we don't reach some type of level ground in an agreement that Trump could launch an attack on them, has you thinking what's next. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how this evolves, especially if they are able to come to some type of agreement or maybe find a middle ground to where they want to work things out with this nuclear program. And then something else you may have been seeing, whether it's right here in Green Country or in different states, these walkouts for the anti-ICE walkouts from high schools. We've had a lot here in Green Country already. I've seen some in Kansas City. And the way that schools are going about it is a little surprising to a lot of people, especially on social media, that people are taking the route, or I guess districts are taking the route of saying you could be suspended if you do these walkouts. Now, you kind of have the question of like, at what point are children able to express where they stand in things, especially with the First Amendment? And when I was in school, I know we had some walkouts, but it never was to the extent that it's at today. So it's really interesting, but kind of eye-opening to see how these students are taking a leap of action and really finding a way to let their voices be heard, whether it's at school or just in the community, or just showing that they stand on a certain topic outside of the school grounds and saying, you know what, I don't mind if I'm suspended. That's a big deal, and it's something that I think high schoolers should be proud about because they're actually taking a stance. Suspension is never the way to go, but it's showing that, you know what, they have a voice too, and I think that is pretty cool. As we talk about what's happening in Green Country and across the states, a big conversation right now is data centers, and a new one that's come back is transmission lines. So recently, I was at a meeting this week actually for the data center in Sand Springs area that was proposed. It's called Project Spring. And the big thing with this is data centers are popping up everywhere across the map. And one thing about Oklahoma is that we have all this green land here, and a lot of people are looking at Oklahoma to use some of this land that they think people aren't using. And so these data centers are coming in or trying to come in, and unfortunately, Sand Springs wasn't able to fight it off. They have passed it, and so now it moves on to the next level. But there is a group that is looking to have a lawsuit against Sand Springs about, they believe that this is illegal annexation into this land, and it's about 800 acres. And the place where this is going to go is going to have 3 data centers. A big thing that they are concerned about for the people that either live near it or are in just the general area is the water consumption, the noise, anything that it has when it comes to effect on their agricultural land. And I mean, they're all really good things to be concerned about. I mean, it's your land, you've used that property for years, or it's been passed down through generations. And a lot of the conversation when there were public comment was that, we don't even know what this looks like. We don't know, they only had prior to go off of. And some of the people that were there for it had mentioned prior and kind of where they were of like becoming a better town. But then other people in Sand Springs were like, we're not prior. So a very interesting argument there that we'll definitely have to keep following up on, because while they voted to continue, this lawsuit is still kind of getting together, and they haven't filed the lawsuit just yet. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And then the next thing is these transmission lines. Some months ago, I actually was at a lot of meetings about a large transmission line coming in. And yesterday I went to an open house where this project is called Northeast Oklahoma Transmission Enhancement Project. And it's through PSO and Southeast or Southwest Power Pool. And it's going to be 100 miles of transmission lines. It sounds small, but when you talk to these people whose land it could impact, it's like if you don't have land, you don't really think about these things until big projects like this come into play, right? And so while talking to PSO and then talking to the people who are against it, their group was called Protect Rural Oklahoma, and they had mentioned like they don't feel like this will impact them. It's just kind of like going to be the house of where these lines will go, but that electricity will go somewhere else to the east. And these transmission lines will be 100 miles long. It'll go over at least 8 tribal lands, and then you'll have 4 Oklahoma counties that'll be affected. And so it's kind of like we're back on the table with transmission lines, and then we're back on the table with data centers. And they kind of go hand in hand because these data centers will need a lot of electricity to keep running. And these transmission lines come in, it's like people around are putting 2 to 2 together and think that, people could be working together. Or, if we vote no for these transmission lines, the data centers won't be able to come in, or vice versa. So it's kind of a tug and pull here with all the electricity, the transmission lines, on top of what they think these things could be used for. Because they haven't really gotten an answer other than yesterday when I talked to PSO about the transmission lines. It was that these would be a way to be of assistance, whether there's a natural disaster or if the grid, something was to happen to the grid, you have the backup of the transmission lines. So there are some pros and cons to a lot of these, whether it's the transmission lines or the data centers. But what I've heard from both parties, whether they're for or against it, do your research, because once it comes into your town, or if it's proposed to come into in your town, you want to be prepared to speak at any meeting, whether it's in your area or in your county. So those are kind of the bigger topics right now to keep a lookout on, and we'll continue to follow these things. And like I said, this show is just about things that are happening across the seas or across the street, and I'm going to continue to let you know how they affect you and yours. So make sure you tune in every Friday at 1:30 for Viral and Verified, and